Good morning YouTube and welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to complete an oil service on an E46 M3 with the S54 engine. Hopefully it'll help a few of you out, so stay tuned. So before we get underway, I'm going to get some temperature in the engine. As hopefully you saw there, this motor sounds sweet. I've got to be honest, for the mileage, for the fact that it's not been started for probably 3 or 4 months and it sounds that sweet, stone cold. Oh man, what a gem, what a gem. So like I say, because it hasn't been started for so long, I'm going to leave it running for a little bit, not get it red hot because I don't want to be scolded by everything when we're in the engine bay, but I certainly want that oil warmed up so that it flows nicely when we drain it. Now I'm sure there's many of you watching in the same boat as myself. A modified car is life, and with that comes its problems. So the central jacking point on the E46 M3 is under the middle of the bumper, and to get that you've obviously got to slide your trolley jack under there, but like me, it doesn't clear. So I've got a homemade bit of wood off of some pallet blocks which allows me to jack the car on the jacking point on the side, put that under the wheel, lower it back down, and then my jack has enough clearance to reach the central point to bring them both up together. With the axle stands positioned either side under the jacking points, you can then lower the car back down and then you're safe to work underneath there. Obviously make sure they sit square on the jack points, otherwise there is a risk it can fall off. On to the parts we're going to require for today's oil service. So I've gone with the genuine BMW oil filter, which comes with the filter and all the replacement seals, which we're going to go through. You're also going to need 6 litres of 10W60 oil. Now Castrol was the original supplier for BMW. I believe it might have moved to Shell now. Let me know in the comments, but you can still get hold of the Castrol stuff. It does state on the back that it's suitable for the M models. As I say, you need 6 litres. I picked up 2 4 litres because they had a deal on at my local motor factors. I'd be really careful where you buy it from because there have been reports of fake 10W60 Castrol out and about. This was last year, so I don't know whether it's been resolved now. But for me, I went to my local Halfords, they had a special on it, and it was actually cheaper to buy it in the 4 litres than it used to be when I bought the big 20 litre drum. But that's what you're going to need to get the service parts underway. The tools you're going to need for the job is pretty straightforward. The only ones I'm not going to get on camera if you are working from home is you're going to need a trolley jack and some axle stands. You're also going to need an oil drain pan that can hold at least 6 litres of oil. I think mine's something like 20 litres, so plenty if it does overflow or you move it around. Now actually on the bench you're going to need workshop rags or kitchen towel like which has got here. Don't use toilet paper because it'll fray apart, but something that's pretty hardcore. Going to need a knife or a blade or a pick. Essentially I use this to open the oil, and I also use it to cut off the old O-rings off of the bolt, which we'll show later in the video. You're going to need a 6mm Allen key or a hex side. You're going to need a 13mm socket, an extension, a ratchet, and a torque wrench. Now, the torque wrench, from memory, I'm going to put the torque settings in there. It's something like 20, is it 24 newton meters and 32 newton meters from memory, but that'll be later in the video. So you need that sort of range. And another thing is brake and clutch cleaner, basically a degreaser, because oil starts going everywhere. It's great for cleaning that without leaving any residue. The only final thing that's optional is a funnel for when you fill the engine back up. If you're pretty good with a steady hand, you'll be fine, but if you get it wrong, you could make quite a mess in the engine bay. I think that wraps up the tools required for the job. The engine oil drain plug sits about a foot behind the central jacking point. It's pretty straightforward to access. There might be a little plastic cover, which mine's never had since the day I bought it, and then you'll be able to see the 6mm Allen key. Put that in there, make sure it sits nice and square because you don't want to round this off, and then undo it. Now what I normally do is unwind it until you're probably about halfway down the threads, stop, remove the Allen key, and then you can just wind the final bit out by hand. And just as you get to the end of the threads, you can almost stop the oil coming out just by keeping some force against it, and then quickly whip the sump plug out of the way. But you do need to be careful, because if the engine oil is hot, this is going to burn you pretty bad. That's the importance of not having the engine red hot. As I say, I would advise wearing gloves, because if you get burnt, it's going to be pretty nasty. But for me, the engine got up to about 30-40 degrees on the oil, and I'd left it for 15 minutes while I was jacking it up, so it actually wasn't that hot given the time it had been running. And this is why you should wear gloves. But good news is, as you can see on there, the oil is still lovely and clean, so hasn't done a lot of miles since the last service, done it more on age. But yeah, let's clean up my hands and start putting things back together. Back to the top side of the engine, we simply need to disconnect the throttle position sensor plug, which is a metal prong that's pushed in, and then you can pull the plug away. An optional choice is to put some cloth or towel around the oil filter housing so that when you do remove it, it doesn't all dribble down the block, which I've done here. If you've recently bought your e46 M3 and you've never done an oil service, this is going to give you a good indication of what the engine internals are like. As you can see in mine, the oil's gold, the metal's clean. If it's all black and stained, it probably indicates it hasn't had an amazing life in the past. But regular oil changes will definitely help that. And what we'll do now is just clean out this part in here. So while we wait for this wonderful rain shower to pass over, pleasure of tinkering on the driveway, let's have a look at what's in the box. So we've got the new genuine BMW filter. As you can see, my old one was a genuine filter as well. You've got the oil filter housing washer, which is basically this big one in here. You've got the oil filter housing bolt washer, the smallest O-ring, which is going to go on the bottom of that big bolt there. You've then got the oil filter housing cap washer, which goes on that top side. Mine is still sort of fused onto that bolt, which we'll have to get off. And then finally, you've got the copper sump washer, which goes back on the bottom of the engine. Now, what you need to be careful of when you remove the sump plug, obviously avoid dropping it in the oil. We must have all done that. And check that this isn't still stuck to the bottom of the sump, the engine basically, because my one, when I undid it, it actually just fell out into the drain tray, which is fine. But if it's stuck to the bottom of the sump and you put two copper washers on there, there's a chance of it leaking. But anyway, let's get these seals switched over and get it all back together. As you hopefully saw there in the GoPro clip, we did the new O-ring on the oil filter housing cap using the old oil off the filter, lubricated it up and it slid over nicely. Obviously got the new oil filter, we've got the oil filter housing bolt, the new O-ring on the bottom there was also oiled up, and the new washer is on there that comes in the kit. And finally the sump plug washer is also on there, the copper washer, and this has all been degreased as well. So everything is now ready to go back on the car. The S54 engine takes around 5.5 litres roughly, and that will certainly be enough for us to get it on the dipstick and start checking the level once everything's up to temperature. So, 2 8-litre tubs, obviously way too much. The first thing we're going to do is open a 4-litre one on its own, put about half a litre into the oil filter housing, which I'm going to show in a second, just so the filter's primed and you're not going to get a dry start. And then the rest of that is all going to go in through the oil filler cap. So that's then 4 litres in the engine. So out of this we need to then put 1.5 litres also out of this tub, and I'm just going to use the old empty jug because it's got a 1.5 litre mark to fill up the motor with. But I'll show it on camera anyway, so it'll all make sense hopefully for you guys at home. With 5.5 litres now inside the engine, it was time to lower the car down, which is essentially the reverse of what you did jacking it up. Pretty straightforward. And then I do a quick check on the dipstick to see where the oil is. Now this is not an accurate way at this stage to measure the oil level, but it's always reassuring for me to see that it's on the dipstick, because if it's not, you might have made a calculation error on how much oil we've put in the engine. Back inside the car, we're now going to put the ignition on, and you'll see the oil pressure light there, it's in red. When the car starts, you want that to disappear within a couple of seconds. If it doesn't, you've got a problem, there's no oil pressure. So let's fire it up. 1, 2, 3. 3 seconds, oil pressure light's gone, which is a good indication. Obviously we completely drained the block, but let's let it get up to some temperature and then we'll check the level. With the engine running, it's a good habit to have a quick look around and make sure you've got no oil leaks from the oil filter housing or the sump, and just a general look over the engine never hurts while it's all running. With the oil temperature past the first dot, I'll now switch it off, wait 3 minutes, and then we can check the oil level. So hopefully the camera focuses in there. You can see we're literally just above the minimum. Now the minimum to the maximum is roughly a litre. So I'm going to put about 600 ml in there now, which should bring it up to the midway point. The only final thing left to do is reset the service indicator. So with your key in your hand, hold down, put the key in and turn to position 1. You'll see test illuminate on there. Keep holding it, reset appears, let go, press down again. Starts flashing, let go, press one more, done.